All right. As important as my job as DJ is, we're actually here to talk about SEO for the third day. Happy Thursday. Thanks to everyone that is joining new today and everyone that has been part of the series on yesterday, where we talked about practical SEO, and Tuesday, where we talked about specialized markets. Today is Thursday, part 3 on technical SEO. And just as a reminder, if you weren't able to catch the previous days, or you've got to jump out of here early or want to go back and listen to everything, we are recording everything, all 3 of these webinars, and we will post them to our resources page, as well as if you're registered for any part of the series, we will be sending out an email later on today or tomorrow, depending on what time zone you're in, where you can get the recordings. That being said, enough of me for the week. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or in the question and answer feature in Zoom. I am going to pass this over to Erin. And I don't know why your name says Vital, so I apologize on the typo there, copying slides. But Erin, if you want to take it away, I will fix the screen.
Not a typo. That's my married name, Lexi.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know that.
Hi again, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Erin Myers-Vidal, and I have been at WP Engine for a little over 3 years, working as the lead SEO and digital strategy manager. So just like in our other 3 webinars, we have a new panel of participants and a fresh topic for you today. Technical SEO, one of my favorites. Before we get into that discussion, Miranda and Stefan, we have 2 of the very best technical SEO experts that I've had the pleasure of working with on the panel today. I would love to have you go ahead and introduce yourself, your company, and your role. And then as a little bit of an icebreaker, complete this sentence if you could for me. Technical SEO is a little tricky because blank, but what makes it fun is blank.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Stefan Hernandez. I am based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm Associate Director of SEO at Power Digital Marketing, which is a full-service digital marketing firm based out of San Diego. We have a distributed team internationally and offices all over the country. My particular role as an Associate Director is I manage the technical SEO team here, where we help our team and our clients with all things technical SEO related, from website crawl audits to core web vitals, consulting through migrations, schema markup, etc. And to answer your question, technical SEO is a little tricky because it does require a firm understanding of how Google and other search engines crawl and index content from websites. But what makes it fun is it forces you to stay curious. And I think that is one of the biggest traits that any SEO can have in this space, is you have to stay curious if you want to stay ahead.
And hi, everyone. My name is Miranda. I've been working in SEO for the last 15 years. I'm based in Dubai, working as a VP Organic Performance at Monster. I also have my own agency for which I build websites and I do technical SEO besides other aspects of SEO. And I'm also doing a master in software engineering. And to answer your question about the challenging part of technical SEO, it's basically, especially if you make like very large changes, you cannot do it alone. So you also are dependent on engineering teams. But the fun is actually that when you get things together, it's like really a team effort and you can really make some big impact based on that.
Yeah, so true. I think at WP Engine, when we're talking about making technical changes to the website, we're often collaborating across the WordPress development team, the website strategy team, brand communications, and oftentimes even some external resources where we've worked with PDM in the past and Miranda more recently. So could not be more true or better said. I love it. We will get right into the questions. And I think something that I've been thinking about lately, and some of the questions we've been getting from our audience too, pertain to the fact that, you know, there's a really common misconception about technical SEO, which is if you do a site crawl once and you correct all of the errors once, your site is good to go. I'm hoping that you could both speak to why that is actually not the case.
So one thing is that even if you fix the site, a lot of things are happening after that. So especially like in larger companies, multiple persons are working on the same site. So it's important to keep track of is everything still working properly? And besides the things on your site, Google is also making updates. So you need to keep working on technical SEO to make sure that the website is in line with the Google recommendations.
Yeah, to echo what Miranda said, especially for websites that have a lot of moving parts, lots of teams deploying changes, adding content, really a dynamic website. It's always good to constantly keep an eye on technical SEO, doing more frequent crawls just to make sure that, mistakes can happen. We're all humans, and oftentimes those mistakes can sometimes bring down your rankings or cause some fluctuations there. So it's always good to keep a keen eye on things when there's lots of changes happening on your website, especially for multiple teams that may not be communicating with each other as frequently or really having a full understanding of what's going on. And not to say that everything has to funnel through SEO first, but oftentimes it can be helpful.
On that note, how often are you both doing technical health assessments or website crawls of the properties that you manage?
That's a good question. I would say depending on the website and the need, if it's a really fast moving website, at least quarterly is what we would recommend. With clients that we work with, that we have a lot of close communication with, if we can get, updated ahead of time, like, hey, we're going to deploy this change, or we're going to make these updates to the product side of things that might affect SEO. We'd like to, of course, get involved prior to, but if it's something that we, do on like a quarterly basis and prioritize whatever could be issues or recommendations there, I would say that's probably the normal cadence of what we would recommend.
And also in addition to that, like especially in a quarter is good for like the overall roadmap. So from the bigger picture and the improvements that you want to make, and more from like a day-to-day, making sure that the site is working properly. It's good to have like a crawl scheduled that if something goes wrong or breaks something on your website, that you get alerted so you can take action fast.
Yeah, we'll get a little bit more into alerts and how to monitor your site here later. But for now, I want to dig in a little bit more on the topic of website crawls. I think a lot of our audience is in the nitty gritty of SEO tech. And so when you have a long list of redirects, broken links, missing metadata to clean up, how do you prioritize what to tackle first?
That's always a great question too. So when we perform crawl audits or website audits like this, we always try to assess the relative importance of what an issue would be for that particular site. So for example, if you go through your checklist of 404s, broken links, missing meta descriptions, things like that, you can't always just stack rank those based on a checklist. You have to think about the volume of issues that particular website might have in those categories, and then look at what is going to make the greatest impact. Obviously things like having missing meta descriptions could be deemed as bad, but maybe not as bad as the hundreds of URLs that are missing a canonical tag, which could be causing duplicate content. Or the same thing with like broken internal links, having internal 404s or other, internal broken link errors is considered bad. But if there are several of your, key core pages that are missing title tag elements that aren't rendering properly, that might be a bigger impact item than just running through a checklist and trying to prioritize based on, what we think is an issue. And of course, sometimes you might have a lot of internal 404s that could be really bad. Some of those 404 pages might be receiving backlinks that you want to either, fix those pages because maybe they shouldn't be 404s or they're gone forever. We want to redirect that so we can kind of reclaim some of that link equity. We try to assess it based on like the impact it's going to have on that site. And then oftentimes too, like our clients that are implementing our recommendations ask us like, what is the general level of effort, which can always be a difficult question to answer, but we try to rank it in a way that it's going to be the most impactful based on their time and resources needed to actually implement those items.
Yeah, I would say the same, especially with your last sentence. Like, what is the impact on revenue, and what is the effort that it takes to get it enabled? It's also good to be aware of that certain changes you cannot do only by yourself. So that's especially when you need other teams. Like it takes a bit of time. So the earlier you alert them and get them into the project, the faster you can get things live.
Yeah, Absolutely. Hitting again on that importance of collaborating across teams when working on a large website, especially. On that note too, I'm really curious. So when you're managing a website like Monster, or Stefan, I know you work on some really big accounts as well. I won't mention any of them for the sake of privacy, but what do the typical team structures for a technical health assessment and implementation look like for one of your average customers? I think on this call, we might have some, lone wolves running SEO for an agency or independently for smaller startup companies. So I'd love to hear you two just talk through resourcing and what you've seen to be an effective structure.
So it really depends also on the size of the company, because in a smaller company there are less layers, so it's can sometimes be a bit more efficient to speak directly with the developers. But often teams which are very important are like product teams, because they often decide the roadmap. The engineering team and the developers, because they are implementing the solution. So I would say that those two, and of course the SEO team, are very important. Yeah, I would mainly like product and engineering. Those are, as police from a technical point of view, are very important stakeholders.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I mean, oftentimes if we go to present our recommendations through an audit or whatever else, we're speaking to marketing teams, but we'd like to have dev engineering teams on the call as well, especially if there's any questions when it comes to implementation. Teams sometimes, clients that have like internal dev and engineering teams are often the easiest to work with because there's a lot of internal communication there. But it's not to say that clients that have, external dev teams aren't also easy to work with. I think, in our experience, the end goal is not just to give you a deliverable that says, here's all the issues or opportunities that you have related to technical SEO on your site, but it's actually getting them to become implemented. Otherwise, all that work is for naught. And so we try to make the documentation and the collaboration, communication as effective as possible to ensure that the end goal is actually met. Like, we do have these items implemented. And if we need to make compromises along the way due to technical limitations or whatever it may be, we try to stay in communication with those teams that are actually implementing. So really, depending on your company structure or not, that's our end goal, is to speak to the right people and just make sure that there's an open line of communication, especially when it comes to, questions about recommendations, how to do something, or if there's compromises that need to be made, we can help consult through that to the end.
Yeah, because the initial crawl and discovering the issues that need to be resolved is one thing, but then actually going in and implementing them is a whole other beast. And then monitoring the effect of those changes comes third, obviously. So all three really important components. And I think as an SEO, the dream really is to have a dedicated WordPress developer handy to make those technical implementations as needed, but also great when you have a big team to call on and collaborate with too.
Another thing that we run into sometimes is we might have a larger recommendation or perhaps an opportunity that we suggest that could help with growth. Maybe not specifically just checking the boxes of technical SEO and what is important and what's not, but let's say we propose something that is an opportunity, or perhaps there is a big issue, and the client comes back and says, we don't have the resources or capability of doing this right now for whatever reason. What is the impact if we don't do this? And I think that's another, important component of technical SEO, is there's opportunities and there's sometimes issues where it's not worth the time or resources that you may have at the moment. What is this doing for us right now? Is this holding us back? Is there, a big opportunity cost here if we don't spend more time and resources to try and accomplish X or whatever the issue is? And, that's another thing that we help work with our clients a lot too, because their internal resources or external resources may be stacked. They might need to put things off. What are they risking if there's certain issues or recommendations that they can't get to immediately? And, working towards plans and solutions to help with that is often where we get a lot of good feedback in these sorts of things. And, sometimes you can't tackle everything. Every website is different. The technology powered behind that website can be different. So there's oftentimes a lot of compromises and things, but it's nice to help a client or have you even understand, what is the potential impact that you could have if you don't act upon something, or is it going to be, something that's totally fine, and focus on other things that could be, better towards growth and growing your business.
Yeah, great point, Stefan. All right, transitioning a little here. A question I love to ask is, what are you both doing currently to improve SEO rank for the sites that you manage? Feel free to focus on one in particular or more broadly if that makes sense. However you'd like to answer that question.
That's also a great question. I think one thing that for one of our clients we're doing right now is not so much like fixing issues and errors, but looking at the website from a technical perspective and thinking about how could we create more indexable pages from a event calendar system that this client has. Their sole goal is ticket purchases and affiliate ticket revenue. And we look at keyword research and we see that a lot of people are searching for concerts in, say, X city today, this week, this month, this weekend. And the current calendar system we had on this website didn't really allow you to generate an indexable page with those specific filters. It was basically just concerts in X city. So I'm based in Las Vegas. So for example, concerts in Las Vegas. While you could filter today, this week, this month, based on the navigation and the URLs that were generated there, they were all canonicalizing back to just the main concerts in city, right? And so after looking at keyword research and seeing that we could probably target a lot more long tail specific phrases, not just by like a date time frame, but also by genres. So they would have like rock, R&B, hip hop, etc. Probably about 15 to 18 total genres. And we could also specifically have a page index for rock concerts in Las Vegas, but we couldn't have longer tail phrases with date base or rock concerts in Las Vegas this weekend. And so after looking at, website crawls and seeing that all of these URLs that were being crawled, but canonicalized back to a page that was just the root page, we saw this as an opportunity to kind of grow our keyword landscape. And we worked with the dev and engineering teams. We came up with a lot of the different logic, for lack of a better term, that we would have to implement to make sure that our canonical tags were still intact and doing what they're supposed to do by preventing duplicate content, but also allowing us to have newly indexable pages that would allow us to rank for a whole plethora of keywords that we weren't able to before. And I think that's one thing about technical SEO that is often overlooked. And not to say that any SEO couldn't really assess a situation like that and find the opportunity, but by looking for issues and errors with things like canonicalization, we did find a huge key opportunity for this particular website. And since implementing that probably about a month ago, we've seen 200% growth in that particular side of the site. And it was all content that we had there already. It just wasn't indexable. And of course, we looked at metadata optimizations and how we can string together the key terms and the navigation filters and things like that to make this all dynamic. This particular website has cities internationally all over the world. So it was kind of bolting on thousands and thousands of pages just by looking at that particular logic. And it's been a huge success factor for us. And so that's one probably big recent thing that I can say to answer your question.
Yeah, what a great nugget of information. Thank you for sharing that, Stefan. I think everybody probably found that very, very interesting and helpful to consider if they're not already thinking about long tail keyword opportunities in that way. Miranda, how about you?
There are actually like three large areas where I'm currently working on. One is from a technical perspective, instead of like just optimizing the site that we currently have, go back to the drawing table and see like how can we build something which is more efficient, more wider reach, more unique pages. So I cannot go too much in detail, but it's like from a site hierarchy perspective and efficiency, that's a very large project. The other thing is to improve the indexation or the accessibility actually from URLs, to make sure that all of our URLs are indexed and crawled by Google. So doing a lot of validation with log files and see, is Google able to access all the URLs we have on the site, or do we need to make certain changes? And the other aspect is around international SEO, like how can we make sure that all our sites are ranking across all markets, are not cannibalizing each other. So we're looking into ways like how can we automate the href language tags so they're not dependent on human action, because especially if you have like websites operating in 30, 50 countries, the href language tags only work when they are referring to each other. So that's why it's the best way to automate, to make sure that there's no possibility for human error into the setup. So those are basically 3 large projects I'm currently working on.
All right, good stuff. Transitioning a little here into a different set of questions. Thank you both for those very thoughtful answers. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, Google's core algorithm updates. So on March 15th, we had the latest Google core algorithm update. We've had rumors recently of another one soon to come. How has the core algorithm updates from this year impacted the sites you manage, and how are you responding to those changes for your customers or the sites that you manage?
We actually noticed that across the jobs industry, that a lot of websites were impacted. So likely Google has changed something in the way like how it's presenting jobs. So we actually noticed quite some impact after that update, which is very annoying, of course, because you're working on your strategy and then suddenly like there's no announcement. Suddenly that Google comes with the update and you see your performance like fluctuating. So it's like, okay. So it's all forces like what has been impacted by Google? Why is it being impacted? What can we do to improve it? So we had like an urgency project in between to tackle the impact of the core update. But yeah, especially the one in March, that was quite considerable for the jobs industry.
I think with the clients that I manage, we saw some fluctuations there, but I wouldn't say like we were greatly impacted. We saw maybe some growth in some clients and other clients maybe still kind of remain the same. But, there's also the thing too with core algorithm updates specifically, and Google has said this time and time again, there's no specific action that you can or should take following a core algorithm update. When we have other algorithm updates like, product review updates, things like that, there might be some more specific action that you could take following an update like that, like implementing features, schema types, stuff like that, that you didn't have before. But with the core algorithm update, you're kind of like, all right, this is what I get. And, hopefully we were doing all the right things right. And we'll just continue to do all of the right things and see how that impacts, which is obviously for SEOs, especially SEO has been in this industry for a long time, extremely frustrating. We always see an algorithm happen and maybe our site gets hit in a very negative way. And it's, complete reactive scramble to try and fix an issue. And let's say you did identify a big issue around that time and you do fix it. There's still no guarantee that that's going to help you recover after a core algorithm update. So I think, with SEO in general, it's just consistently doing, good work and consistently making sure that your website can be crawled and indexed correctly. You're creating good content is really the best recommendation you can get. And as many ways as you want to spin it, Google comes back with the same answer. There's nothing specific that you can do here. It's just, continue to create good content and continue to make sure that your websites are crawlable and your content is renderable and indexable, and you should just be fine.
Yeah, and maybe just as a context, if you follow that path, so if you really focus on the user, generate great content, really like have a website basically to be proud of, like really doing the good things, then usually you benefit from core updates. So that's why usually if you follow that approach, you're quite safe. So, and also in the Google guidelines, Google mentions like it's not necessarily that you do something wrong. It's just other things are being valued more. And that's why certain websites can have an impact of the core update. I do always find it very interesting, like what is then being hit. So to get an understanding, what are the things that Google's now values more instead of less, to make sure like what should we then strive further. Like normally, if you always focus on quality, you're on the safe path, but still it can be that, yeah, Google is valuing particular things more, and it's good to know what it is, so you can also make sure that you incorporate it.
Yeah, so safe to say Google's core algorithm updates tend to be a bit ambiguous. It doesn't necessarily result in a checklist of things that you need to go do. However, if you're doing the right thing, producing quality content, following technical best practices for your website and thinking of the user first, then you'll probably be in pretty okay shape.
That's the hope, right? Sometimes like these landscapes change too, where it's not so much you dropped in rankings and therefore maybe you're not seeing the same amount of traffic you used to, especially after, say, Google is introducing a new SERP feature. And I imagine in like the event space and the job space, the featured snippet that shows a list of jobs or events that has evolved over the years numerous times. And for websites that aren't able to compete in some of those SERP features that are predominant at the top of the search results oftentimes, or maybe that's what they're striving to get into, is a good focus. And so when you see that the landscape has changed, like even introducing the people also asks sections or other rich snippet features that might be pushing content further down page one results, even with like products and merchant listings, organic and both paid, when you look at how over the last even just decade, the landscape has changed from just 10 blue links and maybe a local pack to all of these new features in the search results. It can be difficult to compete. And so, with technical SEO specifically, you try to look at opportunities to where you can be featured in some of these SERP features, whether that's introducing schema markup or improving your existing schema markup or content structure, things like that. It's kind of just adapting to what the landscape is, and Google is constantly changing these things. And so that's how I look at it, especially from like a technical perspective, is like, is there something in the technical SEO realm that we could do to improve or introduce to a site so that they can be featured in these different sections on the search results? And if not, then it's in some cases it's like setting expectations with the client, like it's not the way things used to be. So yeah, you might see the same amount of impressions but a decreased click-through rate, but it's because users now have a lot of other rich experiences in the search results to be able to click through and find the content or information or products that they're searching for. And it's not just, the blue links anymore, per se, at least what we used to call it. So I think just kind of adapting to that and figuring out other ways that you can win and be visible in those spaces, especially with, queries that have a lot of SERP features on page one. You really have to kind of figure out how to adapt and find your place where you're going to get the highest visibility and chances to increase your click-through rate, especially if you're already ranking.
Yeah, I would say that's also particularly interesting with the search generative experience, which is coming up probably by the end of the year, because that will also have like a large impact probably on impressions versus clicks, because then that will come above the SEO results, and it will be like a more personalized experience based on what the users search for, and then they can click within this new feature from Google that they're working on. So that will also have, likely a large impact on the figures.
On the note of search generative experience, that's a new one. That's a hot topic in the SEO tech world. How are you preparing your customers for the onset of the SG?
So we're telling about that it's coming, that they know that they can expect some fluctuations. At the moment, it's still very early to see what the impact is. So very likely it will push the SEO results down. But at least in Google Labs, you can see that they are linking out to articles. They are showing product links. So that's why it's not necessary that it's like SEO traffic will potentially decline, because they're still being linked from within the search generative experience. So that's why I think it would be a bit too early to say like this is what will happen, but at least it's good to make the clients aware that this is coming, and this can have an impact on figures, but it's still a bit unclear what that will be.
Yeah, the same thing over here. Right now, we're starting to educate our clients on SGE and what it is and sort of what to expect. I mean, even a lot of us in the SEO space don't really know exactly what to expect when it fully rolls out. But, I think on our side, the agency side, it's important to, inform our clients of these things that are coming out and how it might have a potential impact. And more specifically too, like even just looking at, the current sort of landscape, will show examples of queries related to keywords that we're trying to go after for that particular client to see what the results tend to look like. And then even if right now, maybe our clients' results happen to be generated in those queries. And in some cases, if it's a very transactional related query or a very informational query, and if you've done enough work in SGE right now, you kind of see there's a lot of variations to that. And of course, that's going to change over the next several months. So really just education. And then on the SEO side of things too, trying to come up with ways that we might be able to optimize the websites to help appear in SGE results better. Right now, of course, there is no particular playbook or particular set of instructions, at least that I'm aware of, that Google has said this is how you can get into SGE results. And they're probably going to come back and say, just continue to do all of the right things that we've said all along. I mean, these are AI generated results and they will be personalized. So I think I'm really curious to see like how we might be able to attribute in like Search Console reports, for example, are they going to show us a report that this impression was made through SGE or these clicks were made through SGE versus the regular search results? And I think if we have the opportunity to kind of see that data, our clients are going to be very curious about it and see how often that's even used and where they might be getting results from that. So I think there's still a lot of unknowns, but it's obviously exciting, maybe extremely frustrating for some in a lot of ways, because, it's just other things to push down the organic search results that, we have been trying to accomplish for a long time. But, there are obviously best practices that I'm sure you can continue to do that will help you see results in SGE, but specific things that maybe you can do, it's very unclear right now. But of course, just staying on top of that and being able to, act upon that on behalf of your clients and educating our clients is the goal.
Yeah, well said. Preparation is key. With this one, we'll have to keep our eye on it and see what happens. All right, shifting a bit here. What are some of the essential tools in your tech stack? And can you briefly touch on how you use each one? Are they free or paid? I'll pause there, and whoever wants to take that first can hop right in.
So the one which I find very important is, of course, like a site crawler, and then often combined with a log file analysis. So I find the combination the most interesting, because on one hand, I can see what are the if there's any errors or things on the website that we need to improve, but also are these pages visited by Googlebot? So that's why any tools that have this combination, as a Botify or an OnCrawl, those are I find very valuable. That's from like the crawling and auditing perspective. And then of course, like for SEO rankings, like there are a lot of tools out there, but Conductor, Moz, like that's also very important. And there's so many tools, but I also leave the floor to Stefan.
Yeah, no, there's lots of site crawlers out there. I'm personally a Screaming Frog fanboy. I've been using Screaming Frog ever since I started SEO 12 years ago. But oftentimes you might come across big enterprise websites where Screaming Frog is just not enough juice. So Botify, Deep Crawler, now Loomer, OnCrawl, these are all great tools that can certainly help with like larger enterprise level websites. Of course, Google Search Console. I also use SEMrush and Ahrefs for other types of analysis. For page speed or core web vitals, obviously Lighthouse in Chrome is good. I like webpagetest.org, GTmetrix. They have a lot better expanded views on how you might be able to, pass off recommendations to dev teams and look at waterfall reports. That's kind of like the typical stack, but I'm kind of tool agnostic. Whatever is needed to get the job done. I don't have, any preference or anything specifically, but I'd say like that's my go-to toolbox.
Yeah, it's basically for the purpose. So like one is like auditing, one is like keeping track of performance, and within those types, you have like so many tools available.
Yeah, definitely. No shortage of different tools to choose from, but it's always good to hear what different SEOs are keeping near and dear to their heart or favorited in their browser. Which on that note, Chrome extensions, how about those? Any Any Chrome extensions that you're really loving or finding yourself clicking on every day?
The ones I almost use every day is like SEO Meta in one click, C robots, open pages in multiple tabs, very handy if I do a review. One also very interesting, like OScraper. So if you have the Google results, and then you can basically scrape the results and get all the URLs from that page. So usually when I do that, I set the Google results to 100. So I see 100 results based for a certain query. Then I use OScraper, and then I get all the websites that are ranking for that keywords. So it helps a lot with research. And then, of course, like web developer tools, which is a very interesting one, redirect path. So yeah, a lot.
Yeah, same thing. I use quite a few, but I try not to stack my address bar with every extension out there. I use a lot of bookmarklets actually, because they're just super lightweight, and sometimes I just need something quick. I have to check out OScraper. I use a bookmarklet that just kind of scrapes the search results and throws it in a new tab in a plain text setting, so I could throw it in a crawler or throw it in a spreadsheet. But I would say some of my most go-tos that I get like a lot of questions on, like, hey, what is that extension? Link redirect trace from Link Research Tools is one of my favorite. So if you know that a URL has gone through several redirects, or 301s, 302s, 307s, whatever it may be, it could quickly show you what that trace was. SEO Meta in one click is always great too. And then other extensions that may not be typically SEO related, whatnot, but I use a lot of bookmarklets, some of which I just found on like articles on the web, or after kind of dissecting the JavaScript behind them and made my own. So if I'm on a page, I like to see if that page is indexed. You can click on a bookmarklet, it'll open up a Google search result with the site operator right in front of it, so you could see that, things like that. And it's a little bit more lightweight on my browser. So, if I could throw it in a bookmarklet and do the same thing that an extension might with less memory usage, I'll try to do that first.
Hey, bookmarklets for the win.
Oh yeah.
Are these free tools or are these paid tools? I know some of those that you've touched on, like Conductor, SEMrush, Screaming Frog, are definitely paid. Ahrefs definitely paid. Could you just note some that might be free to use for those operating on a lean budget in the crowd?
I think you could probably get away with a lot of these types of extensions in the free version. And, of course, if you already subscribe to that product, then signing into that book or signing into that extension can help. But I haven't really ran across an extension that I was like, oh, I absolutely need the paid version here to do the level of work that I needed at, to be honest. And if we had a account with that particular extension, signing in, yeah, great, whatever. But even then, I think a lot of the free versions of these, you could get out of it exactly what you need.
Cool. Love it. Free tools for the win. WP Engine, we are a fan of open source. And so we are always happy to find additional free Chrome extensions and other tools to add to our bookmarks menu. All right, pivoting here a little bit. At WP Engine, we run a quarterly technical health assessment of our site. I'm curious to know, how do you measure success following the implementation of THA work? And beyond Google Search Console and Google Analytics, are there any other reporting tools that you recommend? I was going to keep asking a two-part of that question, but I will stop there and then ask a follow-up instead. Don't mind my awkwardness, y'all.
It's all good. Miranda, did you want to take that one?
I was thinking, like, one thing is, like, first of all, you need to know like when things are being implemented. So especially if there's a certain release date, it's very handy to know, okay, that's the date that I keep monitoring and see if there's any like impact from the SEO work, what we have done. Usually SEO takes a bit of time. So usually, like, especially when we did, for example, like large site migrations, we saw the SEO impact coming from 2 to 3 weeks. So that would be like the earliest signal that something is working. But of course, like sometimes it can take longer. So basically, rankings, traffic, those would be like the kind of things I would look into. And then based on like, so I usually keep track, like that was when a certain thing went live. And then I go back like 1 month, 2 months later to see, do I see an impact based on the thing that went live?
Yeah, I would say, I know you said beyond Search Console and analytics, but I think if you're looking at implementing a certain recommendation or implementing a certain fix, you kind of want to monitor Search Console to see if the keywords that might be impacted from the pages affected in that, are you seeing an increase in impressions? Are you seeing an increase in clicks, that sort of thing? And of course, if you're monitoring keyword rankings, like specifically like a specific list of keywords, tracking that on a daily, weekly basis, whatever it may be, to see if you're actually improving in rankings, there is going to be a key factor to success. However you monitor rankings, whether even if you're looking at just like the third-party databases and SEMrush or Ahrefs, are you starting to see a lift in certain sections of your site where those recommendations may have been impacted, where you can actually start to see some signals? And then analytics, of course, the whole goal of getting traffic from our organic search is to be able to rank in positions that can actually produce clicks. So, if you're gunning for page 1 or you're looking at striking distance keywords, like what tools you use right now, it's really just kind of how you set up the measurement. And like Miranda said too, like when these actual implementations took effect, how long you think it might take for Google to recrawl the site or the section of the site, or however many URLs that might have been impacted could be a factor there. But I also think too, like, especially if it's something, if a recommendation that you implemented is very specific to a certain section of your website or a certain, group of keywords that you're trying to target, setting that up beforehand so you can kind of benchmark against what the implementation might have produced for you. Obviously everyone's hoping that it's going to improve results, but if results stay flat or start to decline, then sort of a timeline there. If there is something that needs to be fixed with the implementation, I think it's always great to just set yourself up with a benchmark, especially if you're implementing anything like significant, whether it's site-wide or across a group of your, core pillar pages. That way you can really tell if that was impactful or not. And then also too, if that's an effort that maybe you need to double down on in different sections of your site, you can kind of use that as sort of a case study to say like, hey, we did this work here. We want to continue to do this work in other sections of our site and scale out that process.
And
Yeah,
actually,
I think it's, go ahead, Miranda.
You touched on a very important part as well in SEO, is that also to be able to communicate back about the impact, because it's not only for your own work that you can see, okay, this is effective, so we need to continue with this kind of work. But it's also important to communicate back to management. Like, this is the thing that we achieve with this work. So also for your next year's SEO budget, that you have enough budget available to keep on doing your SEO work. Because sometimes it can be that you're too focused in your SEO work. You're getting great results, but you're not communicating them. So leadership doesn't know that you're doing all these great things thanks to your SEO work. So that's why it's also really important to make sure that you have measurements set up when you things implement, or that you're able to track it, so that you can also present your success stories and make sure you keep your budget allocation for next year.
Yeah, keep a win folder if you don't, screenshot the wins, keep a change log if you don't have one. Or another thing I really like to do is notate whenever we make a big change in Google Analytics or quarter. That way, as we're reporting and giving a look back at the previous quarter's work, we can say, okay, after we cleaned up these redirects, after we implemented these new meta descriptions, here's the positive impact that we saw, or sometimes the negative impact that we saw as a result of the work that we did here. Not always rainbows and butterflies in technical SEO.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one thing to report on all of the activities that you've done for your client or even for yourself, right? But then it's another thing to look at, like, what was the measurement and effect of those activities or those specific projects? And is it something that, was the goal achieved? Is it continue to invest more resources into and really staying proactive and really business minded in that sense, versus just, hey, I'm checking all the boxes, like I'm doing SEO, but are you doing SEO in a way that's meaningful and impactful for the business? And then of course, if there's a lot of stakeholders involved, what is the story that they're going to want to hear? And how you can start to prepare those stories now while you're doing this work. And when the time comes for a report or a quarterly review, whatever it may be, you're already armed with like, okay, this is what the state looked like prior to these recommendations being implemented. Here's where we are now. This was a win, or maybe we need more resources to continue on the momentum that we're on. I think, thinking about that now and setting yourself up for success is really going to help you, continue to get the resources that you need to do that type of work, or, additional budget if necessary. If stakeholders aren't very sure like what those activities are producing in terms of business value or revenue, then it's going to be a hard decision for them to make to continue to give you the resources or budget you might need to execute work.
Yep. Pausing in case Miranda, you had anything else to add?
No, I fully agree.
Okay, cool. If not, you both touched on a lot of the positive signals that you could look for. Alternatively, what are some of the red flags that you look for when you're working on a website, things to be wary of?
Red flags. I think in the recent year, any JavaScript framework like headless CMS is something that I'll typically say, okay, we'll probably find a lot of issues or opportunities for these types of websites. Obviously, frameworks like React and so on and so forth are not going away anytime soon, but they can be incredibly difficult for SEO. They're getting a lot better. I would say, like, before I take on a project, understanding like what the actual CMS or the tech stack is typically like the first red flag. And then that way I know how to approach perhaps crawling that website or very specific things that I see commonly on different types of framework that I need to, be cognizant of when I'm looking for issues. Every website is obviously built differently and things like that, but that's where I would kind of initially assess, like, how do I even approach auditing a website, understanding the tech stack, and what other components of the website there might be. Are there subdomains with different CMSs? Are there perhaps a WordPress blog installed on a subfolder on top of a e-commerce platform? Like, things like that you might need to just understand, so that when you go and crawl through the site, you know how to provide recommendations that might be specific to different environments or whatever the website may be comprised of, is what I would typically look out for first.
And I think it's also important to understand, if you're like an agency or freelancer and you're getting a new client, like, what is their resources or capacity to make changes? Because otherwise, like, you do like a very full audit and then they say, yeah, sorry, we use a platform that we can't edit or something. So it's like you spend a lot of time, but it cannot be implemented. So it's like client is not happy because they don't see all the impact. You spend a lot of time and it won't be it can't be implemented. So it's quite frustrating. So I think understanding before you start your audit, understanding what is the capacity to get things implemented, the flexibility, the resources that they have. So I think that is an important question to ask. And then in terms of like, because one of like red flags, I think it's in terms of like, it's more the alerting perspective. Like basically if something happens, that you get very quickly alerted. So you can also take action very quickly. So Google alerts, or if you have like a site crawler, set up certain things like if your traffic drops with so much percent day over day or something, or week over week, that at least you get alerted. So you can also take fast action.
Yeah, good ones. Great answers. And Miranda, you actually segued very nicely into my next question, which is, when there are multiple people on a team making changes to a website, you're going to naturally run into issues from time to time, like an important page getting no indexed. Let's hope not, but it's happened to the best of us. How do you monitor this for your clients? Like, to your point, do you set up Google alerts, or are there any other website monitoring tools that really help as a safety net here?
So I try to both on the before it goes live to make sure there's an SEO validation check before it's get implemented. So if stories are being developed and it's ready for QA, that SEO also reviews it to make sure that before anything push live, like it's SEO friendly. And then if there's like an SEO release date, that would be very handy. So normally it's like websites are using like every 2 weeks something goes live. And then basically check on that day or the day after to make sure that if something weird comes up, that that you're fast there to fix things or to flag it, and then to set it up, and then also to set alerts up. So for example, Google alerts, Content King, you can set up different alerts, other crawlers as well. So to basically on multiple stages, so the before the go live and after, so you can take very quick action. And there are a lot of like horror stories, like like for example, it's like it happens to the best of us, but things as like you have, for example, an A/B test, and you see like that the test version works better. In the A/B test had a no index, and when it's pushed live, the no index tag was forgotten to take off. It happened. I was also working for a large enterprise site, and something like we even as an SEO were unaware that something was being updated on that part, but we noticed that their most important pages, shopping pages, had a no index, and then we're like, oh, that's very weird because these are like the revenue pages. And then this is a website of 100,000 pages. And so it's like a really enterprise site, which is operating across 80 countries. And all those pages were on no index. So it was like a massive, a massive impact. We found it quite quickly, and like with the developers, we got it fixed, but Google picked them up already. So all the traffic across these 80 countries were declining. In the countries, the people were like calling the head office, like, what's happening? So yeah, those kind of things you actually want to prevent, and have things in place, like even when stories go live that are not SEO related, but they are impacting the site in the front end, you want to make sure that you, if there's an issue, you capture that as soon as possible.
I don't think I could have said it any better, Miranda. I mean, truthfully, yeah, for any SEO to have some kind of alert scheduled crawl to just really get your back in situations like that is crucial. Whether you use SEMrush or Ahrefs or Botify or whatever software, even just having that set up in the background. Like for me, primarily, I like to crawl sites with Screaming Frog, but I might have different tools also crawling the website in the background to alert me for those things when they happen in real time versus waiting for the next crawl schedule in the queue to find it after the fact. And yeah, that can be a big horror story too, when all of those pages become no index. And that's the funny thing about technical SEO too. Like one line of code can take down your rankings in a lot of ways, whether it's robots.txt getting deployed, blocking the entire site, or a global site-wide meta robots no index tag. Things like that can absolutely destroy you in a lot of ways. And so setting up alerts from those tools is crucial.
And another like horror story, you have your test site, you're building a new website, you put it live, but you forget to update the robots.txt, so that still has a disallow. So there are a lot of like examples and things like to pay like a lot of attention to detail, because yeah, what Stefan said, like very small lines of code can have a massive impact.
Good ones. Good ones. Super spooky, things that you hope never happens, but it does happen to even the best of us. And definitely good to have a safety net in place, to Stephen and Miranda's point. Somebody in chat mentioned, for Ben Schmidt said, for free, you can have an Ahrefs crawl on your site weekly, and it will send to you via email automatically. That's true for SEMrush too. If you're a SEMrush user, you can set up automatic email alerts with that tool as well. Great. Let's see, getting down here, I know we only have a couple of minutes left. So one last question from me, and then we'll get to any additional questions from the audience. This is actually something that came up earlier this week, and I think it's a little funny and just worth addressing. Steph and Miranda, what bothers you about SEO?
Oh, you want to start?
I think it's that not really knowing the exact impact, or being able to predict what will happen if you do X, right? And oftentimes, like your clients, they want to know, like, what is going to be the traffic or ranking impact if we do this? And you have to give them the go-to SEO answer is, it depends. And while it seems like a cop-out, it's true. Like oftentimes it's really hard to predict or forecast what any particular recommendation is going to do for your website and relative to your website. And I think that is probably one of the most frustrating things, but it also makes it the best thing as well. Because then when you do all that work and you see, great results, then you feel that reward from it. And I think that's what keeps most of us coming back to SEO and being an SEO, is that dopamine hit you get when you see the rankings you wanted to accomplish after all the hard work that you did leading up to that point. I think that's what keeps us coming back.
Yeah, uncertainty is hard, but it can pay off when it does. Miranda, how about you?
One thing I also find very annoying is the delayed impact. So you're doing all this hard work, and then maybe you get impact in like 3 weeks if you're lucky, or like 3 months or 6 months. So sometimes it's very annoying that you do all the work and then the impact follows later. Another thing is like the Google Core updates. You're working with, so normally when you do well, you shouldn't have too much impact of those updates because it's actually in line what Google tries to achieve. So to rank the best websites out there that fits the user query. But still, if you're hit, it's very annoying because they come at a sudden moment, and then it screws up all your metrics. So like a lot of unpredictable. Also to Stefan's point, I think that's the most annoying part from SEO. And actually, because of that, like that's why usually paid search budgets are larger than SEO, because they know if they spend so many amounts on paid search, this is what they get out of it. But with SEO, they don't know exactly how long will it take, how much will you get out of it. So although if you look to the cost of SEO traffic, depends on your market, but it's usually that SEO generates a more low cost way of traffic. But then because it's so unpredictable, people or companies actually spend more on paid search because they know what they're going to get out of it.
Good point. Very good point, Miranda. I'm glad you actually touched on that. The difference between a paid budget and an organic budget is typically vast from what we see, for good reason, but long term, we do see the payoff for organic and technical SEO work to be tenfold over time. So it's worth it to invest here, I think is one thing I'd like everyone to take away. Questions from the audience. Any recommendations for finding long tail keywords?
I like to use a lot like, basically if you do keyword research in AdWords Keyword Planner, you only get like the top keywords. So you don't get like the keywords under it and more the long tail. So I like to use a lot like Answer the Public to see like what kind of questions or things are out there. And then when I make an export, I then put it again in Keyword Planner to get the search volumes for those questions to see which ones are popular. So that's one way what I like to use to get a bit more long tail keywords. They're multiple, like people also ask, but I leave the room for Stefan as well.
That's a great strategy. I recently have really fallen in love with the keyword magic tool in SEMrush. It's really powerful, and they're making a lot of changes to it. But also too, I think for finding long tail keywords that you probably didn't know might be driving impressions for your site is just running through your search console. And you might be able to find a lot of long tail phrases that might be populating impressions, may not necessarily clicks or traffic. But if you use like regex operators to include keywords like who, what, when, where, why, how, or things like that, you might be able to derive some questions or other long tail phrases. I mean, that's more so questions, but other long tail phrases in that regard from your own first party data than looking at like a third party tool. And that I think is always a big win, because you know that you might already have momentum for some of these keywords because you're getting impressions. You may just not have the rankings to produce the traffic. And I think that's usually like a big score.
Another one from Francisco, let's squeeze it in. When pushing updates on a website, should you push the entire site or only the pages that have been updated?
It depends.
Yeah, I would also say
whatever updates you are pushing, if it only affects a certain component of your site, then it may be safer or less riskier to do that. But if you're pushing updates that could be site-wide, and I guess it also depends too, like, are these just strictly code updates, or is it also related to your database? You know, there's lots of different factors there, and also to like your tech stack. Are you using Git or some kind of repository for your code? Are you pushing from like a staging environment to a production environment? I guess it would depend there, but I would say probably the best answer is whatever is the least risk that you're willing to take. If it's not necessary and you can deploy in only certain sections, perhaps do that. But I guess it just depends.
Cool. I see Lexi turned her camera back on. I think that means we're at time. We still have some questions coming in. Kashif, our first webinar that we did in this series back in May was focused on AI. You might want to go back and visit that. It's in our resource center if you want to check it out. But Lexi, I will hand it over to you. Stefan and Miranda, thank you. It was so great talking to you both.
Thank you to everyone. This was amazing. I seriously think we could have had like 6 webinars to talk about this. It's been really fun. As someone that's not in SEO and is in events, I've been laughing alongside with you. The answers have been amazing. Thank you, Stefan, Miranda. I actually think Miranda's internet just went out. She was frozen. But just a reminder, everyone, we are recording these and we will post on our resources, as well as we're taking all your questions. We're listening here at WP Engine. We're trying to provide you all with the resources to continue to grow your SEO and know more. So please stay tuned as we continue to produce more content and post all 3 recordings of the week. And that being said, happy 4th of July to those of you that are in the US. We will see you all later next week. If not, have a great weekend. Thank you.